Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Flower Power Live. Plants have so many virtues, some of them even a little bit magical. And Flower Power Live. Oopsie, hold on. Plants have so many virtues. Let me start over. I had myself open in two different windows. Okay. Hello, and welcome to Flower Power Live. Tonight, I want to talk about how plants have so many different virtues. And this week's plant is this beautiful flower here that I have had in my life for many, many years. And I've discovered all kinds of new things about it. And this is Lady's Mantle. Hello, my name is Allison, and I'm from the Well Cultivated Life. And I love sharing all this plant lore and information about the magical, wonderful world of plants with you. So thanks for joining me. And Lady's Mantle is this beautiful plant that's native to Europe, and the name is Al- Alchemilla. Alchemilla. I practiced this so many times. Vulgaris. And one of the endearing features of this plant is that it has the ability to collect water in its little cup-like leaves. And according to Lisa Estabrook, who is the artist and author of today's card that I'll be using, she says that the name Alchemilla comes from the coveted pearl-like beads of morning dew or rain that gather like jewels on her leaves and were considered by ancient alchemists to be the purest form of water available. So this is where the Alchemilla name comes from. I thought that was really cool. So Lady's Mantle is in the rose family, although you probably wouldn't notice that from looking at this plant. It really does not resemble what we usually think of as a rose. And that's partly because roses generally, at least the wild ones that haven't been, horticulturalized, have a distinct flower pattern with 5 petals. And you can see this in like apples or pears or these more non-hybridized versions of rose family. And this one, if you look at it close up, it actually has either 8 petals or 4 petals and 4 little bracts coming out of the side of it. And so uh who knows? But apparently it's in the rose family. I want to show you some pictures of it real quick. So this, I wanted to do this picture, although I got such a big bouquet. I wanted to show you, like, what does this look like when I'm actually seeing it from afar? It's a huge swath of yellow when it is blooming. This plant is lovely in your perennial garden. Like, it's kind of an essential to me to have in my garden. And it blooms for months and has this gorgeous yellow flower. And here's a close up of the flower and see how it has 8 petals on it in that little center. And I put this one in here with the ladybug because it just shows you how incredibly small the flowers actually are. And here is a gorgeous picture of it. Since you can't see my garden from here, here's a picture, an example of what it looks like when it's lining a walkway or a patio of this beautiful yellow color. And another close up of the um, dew that lands on the leaves and collects there this magical dew, apparently, according to alchemists of old. So I was introduced to Lady's Mantle years ago from a friend of mine. And the reason why she loved it so much is because it makes such an excellent flower for a bouquet. And so you can see how it's got these little, beautiful little yellow flowers. See if I can get one out here. I couldn't stop cutting. They were so gorgeous. And, kind of like a baby's breath kind of look to it almost. And then these little cup-shaped leaves on it as well. And that gives it such a good texture. And the color is this really light. Do you remember in Crayola crayons, sea green? That's kind of what this reminds me of, or maybe a sage green, but it's a lighter color than you see in a lot of the other plants. And so it's really, really nice out in the garden. And this seems to be particularly tall this year. It doesn't always get quite this tall. So maybe up to 2 feet at the most. I also found out that Lady's Mantle leaves were traditionally used to make a dye, a green dye for dyeing wool. So After 30 years of growing and loving this plant, I'm finding out all kinds of new things about it. Especially, I did not realize that it had some sorts of medicinal properties. And not surprisingly, many of them are helpful for women, given the name Lady's Mantle. Now, uh, part of the reason why it can collect these is because collect the water and collect the dew in there and makes these beautiful droplets in the morning when you go out in the morning sun. It's really gorgeous. Is because it's very fuzzy on the leaf as well, very soft. You probably could use it for toilet paper if you needed to, but don't. Well, never mind. All right, getting silly now. Um, so, because of this ability to collect water, the sort of doctrine of signatures of a plant, this sort of affinity for water, lady's mantle was sort of thought to be used for places in the body where water needs to be more balanced. And looking at it sort of chemically now, you can see that it has both tannins and salicylates. And according to Matt Wood, this allows it to control the flow of excess water. This is what the tannins do, while the salicylates thin the blood and increase the flowability of fluids. So again, this balancing that so many plants do, it keeps too much from flowing, but it also makes it easier to flow. And it's just basically balancing this water. And so it has been used mostly for tissues that are damp and weak. So astringents kind of tone things up, and that is what Lady's Mantle is so well known for. And as you can imagine, with the name, it's useful for many aspects of the female reproductive system. I'm not going to say female complaints. I just don't like it when people just group everything together. There's a bunch of different parts available there. So let's just not make them all into one grouping. And so that includes toning anything that's kind of become kind of relaxed. We're not going to say saggy. We're going to say relaxed. Okay. Relaxed tissues such as pelvic floor, hernias, rectal tears, prolapse of the uterus. It also helps with pain because of the salicylates, which is the main ingredient in um, aspirin, and menstruation and rheumatism. And of course, its ability to bring together torn tissues can help with like post childbirth and also help with post lactation breasts and getting those toned as well. So, this use for helping with female reproductive system is newer. It used to just be kind of used as a wound remedy for healing kind of drippy or oozing types of wounds because it balances damp. And so if you have a damp wound, you want to use a drying herb, and that means usually an astringent in the tannins. But unfortunately, its popularity isn't really that high because it's just kind of still considered a folk remedy, and there hasn't been a lot of research done on it. Now, in my opinion, a folk remedy holds a lot greater of importance than some sort of medical research, and this is because the observation of what a plant is doing in people's bodies and the results that they're getting counts for a lot more than a laboratory experiment, because this synergistic effect and the sort of subtle and obvious actions of plants, you can't replicate that when you start to take things out into controlled trials. So I always like to look at both. I look at the folk, and then if I see a medical thing, I'll say, well, what do the folk people say about this? Does it actually work? So this herb has stayed kind of out of the mainstream, a little bit, undercover, and that we can celebrate because this is very similar to the actions that it has as a flower essence. And so according to Green Hope Farm, Ladies' Mantles shelters, cradles, and nurtures our insights, ideas, visions, and dreams. These are all things that are inside, and it holds on to those until we're ready to move them forward into creative self expression. When we embark on a creative project, Ladies Mantle helps keep things cloaked, under wraps, and undisturbed by outside forces. So if you're working on something intuitive and creative and personal, you don't want to be disturbed by outside forces. And this is where Ladies Mantle Flower Essence can really come in and help out. And Delta Gardens says that it helps to support integrity and certainty in our sense of self. Our sense of self is definitely something that comes from within, and it helps us to um, support the clarity of purpose, emotions, and thought for renewal of our life purpose. Now, Flower Essence Services, which is the kind of big researcher on a lot of flower essences, says that this is very useful, especially for women who are feeling really disconnected or they're feeling the pain of Mother Earth and kind of they're not really have a they're not using their radiant healing forces, and so this can help them reconnect to that sort of support. Again, the mantle is like the cloak, the protection, and the holding that comes around us. So today's card is from, like I said earlier, the Soulflower, the Plant Spirit Oracle deck. There's a lot of names to go with it, and it is obviously Lady's Mantle. And the word that came with this card is nurturance. And what this is saying is imagine your wildest dreams. You are loved and gently supported. You have all you need to be happy and whole. So you have all you need within you to be happy and whole. You have this natural support just from the life itself, from the parts that are inside of you that know what your wildest dreams are inside. And so this plant, you know, in the garden, it's amazing. It fills in, it's beautiful, but you might not really notice because it has these seemingly subtle flowers on them. I've got a big spray of them here, but if they were kind of spread out, you might not notice this plant, but you would notice if this plant was missing, right? So it's one of those ones that kind of the idea of the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And this is one of those parts that if it's missing, it the certain texture and the color and what it adds to the whole of the garden is going to be really changed. And so that is kind of like the same with our own inner selves as well. Our state of appreciation for the things that I talked about of self-nurturance and creativity and especially your imagination. She talks more about the imagination on this card. That probably could have been the word for this card as well. All these are inside work, right? This is things we're doing in here. They're kind of our own personal um, our own personal work. They're not really meant to be for other people. And so we can find that if we share our inspirations and our dreams, has that ever happened to you? You share it, oh gosh, wouldn't this be great? And I'm planning on this. Sure enough, someone's going to be like, you can't do that. Or you get like a negative response. And so, what we need to do, what Ladies Mantle is telling us, is that, hold those like close inside, keep those cloaked until they're really developed and ready to be released into the world. It's safe to keep them in there. Now, of course, you don't want to keep your dreams and your desires and your imagination squelched. You do want to let it out into the world because we all have so much to offer if we just let ourselves develop those parts of us. That's not considered important in many ways in our culture. Really, it's like, are you smart and did you achieve and those sorts of things. And so a lot of times this inner work is not we don't take time for it because we don't think it makes us successful. But truthfully, without that, the outer expression of that is never going to be as well or as fully developed. So just like ladies mantle is like toning and tightening our muscles and keeping everything nice and firm, that you also want to do that with these other aspects of you. So this week, make sure you are taking time to do a little self-nurturance and just use your imagination about, as she says on the card, what is your wildest dream that you can imagine? And it's okay to just have a fantasy and the beauty of what could happen for you in a dream that could come true. So I want to leave you with this other quote from her because from her webpage. Again, it's mysoulflower.com. And she says, alchemy, the name from which this plant is named, alchemy is defined as the power or process that changes or transforms something in a mysterious or impressive way. And Ladies Mantle shares with me that one of the most powerful, magical, and easily accessible tools of alchemy we all have is simply our imagination. So your imagination is magical. Make sure that you're giving it as much love as the other parts you think you should be doing. Make sure you're taking care, you're toning up the strength of your imagination and your nurturance. So that is the message from Ladies Mantle tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And I will be back here next week at 6:30 for another Flower Power Live. So have a great night, everybody.